so let's get started.
Okay.
Thank you to those who are tuned in, which is John so far. John, you're a stud in my opinion. We haven't even met, and you've been to every one of these workshops, so I appreciate it. I know that a lot of people have been viewing afterwards. Several of the videos are in the low 100 views after, so that's great that people have a chance to look at them afterwards too. So same thing with this video tonight. It will be on our YouTube channel on the Winter Fish Fest workshop playlist that we've emailed out several times to y'all. I'm Sam Brager with Utah Lake Commission. If you haven't attended them yet, we are the hosting entity for this. We've got some great partners and some help in this. And one of those tonight is Russ Franklin with the June Sucker Recovery Implementation Program. And he is here tonight to talk with us about the June Sucker, the recovery efforts that go on with it, and how the progress has come along with that. Before we get to him, though, I did want to have a quick reminder to everybody that the Fish Fest is ending soon. It ends, you can submit photos up until 11:59 p.m. on the 29th. Okay, that's this Saturday. And one special thing that we sent an email out about, and I believe I sent another reminder email about today, is that we're doing a very special raffle drawing for a lovely photo of the lake. In fact, I've got screen sharing right now. Did I put it on here? This photo. Well, in fact, we have a printed canvas of it from Alan's camera that we'll be giving out as a prize. And here's how it works. You have to submit at least one photo. You got to go fishing on Saturday and submit at least one photo on Saturday. And you can be entered just for this particular prize. This is in addition to the other raffle prizes that we're doing. So we encourage everybody to get out on Saturday if you can. It's the last day, and get in your submissions for the raffles. And we hope you're enjoying the Fish Fest. But other than that, Russ, I apologize. I did a poor job of introducing you. Would you be willing to speak a little about yourself first?
Yep. So obviously, I love Zoom meetings or whatever it is. It's because you can see yourself talking, and it's a little bit ski-wampus. Hats off to you, Sam, for how you handle this. And I've got two screens, so if you're getting the side profile, I apologize. My name's Russ Franklin. I'm with the June Sucker Recovery Implementation Program, the Assistant Program Director. Been here for about a year doing this job. I'm with Central Utah Water Conservancy District also. Been with the district for, I think, 8 or 9 years now. I got a background in wildlife biology and been around a little bit. And so that's some background on kind of who I am and where I came from. Basically, I deal a lot with the day-to-day operations of the June Sucker program and the various projects that we have going on trying to recover the species. I guess and I'll touch on it later throughout the presentation, but we're going to talk about how the June Sucker, where it was, where it came from, and how the program started, but also how we arrived to where we are today, where we now have a species that was endangered, and now it's been down, what they call, instead of delisted, it's downlisted to threatened. So basically it's not as severe as endangered. If you have any questions at any time, you're more than welcome to type in there, or feel free to unmute and raise your hand, and we can talk. So let me kind of share my screen. Let me figure out, give you an overview. Let's see if this will work here. And all right, Sam, does that look into? Yep. Okay,
you're good.
Perfect.
It's in presentation mode. We can see it good.
Oh, perfect. So this was a presentation that was given by Chris Kelleher. He is the programs director for the June Sucker Recovery Implementation Program. I know you think I should have it down pat by now, but saying it so many times in a day, we usually just call it the JS RIP or something to that effect, just because it gets a little bit hard to keep saying that over and over all day long. And this was given at our annual assessment. Every year in April, we have an annual assessment where we discuss the past year's accomplishments and discuss all of our projects and what happened throughout the year. And so because of the downlisting of the June Sucker, Chris gave this great presentation on the history of the June Sucker. So back in the 1800s, David Starr Jordan, he actually helped to start, I think it was either Harvard or Stanford University. He was one of the individuals that actually helped to set up the university. He came out here, he was in Utah, and he basically found the June Suckers in Utah Lake, I mean, he was obviously the first man to ever see a June sucker, but he was the one who actually labeled them. And, you know, he called the Utah Lake the greatest sucker pond in the universe, just because of how many June suckers there were. So basically, the history of the June sucker, most people know that the June sucker was endangered. It was listed as endangered on April 30th in 1986. And basically, there was a few reasons for it to be listed. They're endemic to Utah Lake, which means that they're only found in Utah Lake and its tributaries. And throughout, you know, from when the pioneers came and all the different changes, you know, the population was at a brink where, you know, they were going to go extinct if we didn't step in to try and help restore them. There are multiple variables about it. When you think about it, when the pioneers came, and we do have a June sucker recovery website, and I'll touch on that here in a little bit, and I'll go kind of over the history. But so when the pioneers came, they came into the valley, they settled the valley, and much across the west, you know, they started to go, you know, around the west. Everybody started to have fish stocking in all the different lakes and tributaries across the whole United States. Well, the settlers did bring in carp, and so that was one of the things that was introduced into Utah Lake was the carp. And they brought in the carp because, let's face it, carp survive almost anywhere. And, you know, being a lot of immigrants from Europe, carp was considered a delicacy, and it was a good way to raise money and food. And so it was introduced into Utah Lake. On top of that, in the 1930s, we did have a great drought, and the lake got down so far that you could actually walk across the lake on dry land. I think in 1934 and 1935, I think it was the newspaper out of Lehigh. I don't know if it's Lehigh Free Press, but they said that the deepest spot on the lake was between 7 and 14 inches. And that was out in the, you know, where you could find the deepest spot. So basically, during the Great Dust Bowl, the Utah Lake had dried up. And then once it filled back up after the drought, all the underwater aquatic vegetation, I guess that's almost redundant to say that, the aquatic vegetation, the macrophytes weren't able to reestablish because you have the carp that were in the lake. And the carp, pretty much, they act like, if you were to compare them to a terrestrial animal, they are almost like a feral pig. And so they root around, and they just don't let the, you know, aquatic vegetation reestablish it. And that vegetation is very important for the June sucker. You know, it provides nursery habitat, it provides brood rearing areas. And so at this point, and I'm kind of getting a little bit ahead of myself, but at this point, the June sucker, you know, population, they were being harvested by the pioneers and by, you know, those in the valley. There was commercial fisheries on Utah Lake. They were harvesting the carp, they were harvesting the June sucker at the same time. The underwater vegetation wasn't reestablishing, so, you know, they weren't being replenished. And then in the 1950s and 60s, you did have the introduction of things like white bass and crappie and other species like that, which also did prey upon all of the larvae and the fry that were coming down from the Provo River. And you did have channelization of the Provo River so that you could irrigate farmers' fields and things like that. So basically, you had a lot of different changes to the habitat, and all of these changes led up to the June suckers almost going extinct. So back to here is, you know, on April 30th, 1986, they were listed as endangered. And so here's just kind of a quote, excuse me. It says, June suckers are precariously near to the extinction. They remain only as a rapidly shrinking and aging remnant population. Without recent successful reproduction, this demographic observation, combined with the overwhelming dominance of non-native fishes in Utah Lake and current water management practices, may preclude their survival nature. So this is a picture of Chris Kelleher back in 1999 when he was a young field biologist, and he was doing surveys in the Provo River. And what they estimated in 1998 is that there was closer to about 300 individuals was left on the spawning run in 1998. And this is from, if you look at some of the journals from the pioneers, there was, thousands upon thousands of fish in the Provo River when they were spawning. And now you're down to 300 individuals. And so here's kind of a screen showing the life cycle of the June sucker. And basically right now, as we've gone through the recovery process, as we've changed a lot of the management, as we've changed and improved everywhere, our last critical component in the recruitment bottleneck is, if you look at these circles, is going, I'm trying to point on my screen with my hand, but you guys can't see it. It is basically going from where you have larvae to year of young into juveniles. That is, where we do have the fish experimental station where we do raise. We have June suckers in captivity. We do, raise them in there. We do release them for stocking, just like the DWR does stock trout and other species throughout Utah. We do have, June suckers there, and we have been stocking them actively for quite a few years. We have seen an increase in the spawning population in the Provo and Hobble Creek River and Creek. But the one final component that we need is to get them from, the larvae stage to actually get them to year of young and a juvenile so that they can survive to adulthood. One of the main things that has made this possible is, and it's different from a lot of other areas, especially when you start talking to other recovery programs, is that we have great partnerships. When they formed this, they reached out to all the different agencies that would have an impact or be impacted by the June sucker and the recovery of this. And so on the June sucker program, we have 9 different agencies and 1 special interest group. So we have the DNR, we have the Department of Interior, we have the URMCC, the Utah Reclamation, Mitigation, and Conservation Commission. We have Central Utah Water Conservancy District. We have the Fish and Wildlife Service. You have the Bureau of Reclamation, the Provo Reservoir Water Users Company, the Provo River Water Users Association, and obviously Utah Division of Water Quality. And, it's important to understand how all of these agencies interact when it comes to the program. So you have the Department of Natural Resources, which obviously the DWR, Division of Wildlife Resources, is part of that. And they provide a lot of on-the-ground support and expertise. They also do run the fish experimental station. These are, the biologists, the ichthyologists that are on the ground, that are tagging fish, that are monitoring and doing a lot of that work for the program. You have the Department of Interior, especially the Central Utah Project Completion Act. And so the Department of Interior, provides, has water rights and provides, obviously, all these agencies provide funding of one form or another. And, without that, we couldn't do this. But they also provide, water and water rights so that the program can not only help to recover the June sucker, but also, this is important so that we can continue to develop responsibly water here in Utah County and Salt Lake County. Obviously, you have Central Utah Water Conservancy District. That's where I am housed, and the district uses its facilities and pipeline to actually be able to transfer water, depending upon where it's needed. But we can take water all the way up from Strawberry, and we can transfer that water down into the Provo River or to Hobble Creek to augment fish flow so that we can actually have successful spawning runs. You've got the Fish and Wildlife Service, and they were the ones that listed it as endangered, but also they provide a great benefit and technical expertise similar to what the DWR or DNR does, but they give more expertise on the endangered species side. So you've got the Bureau of Reclamation. So you've got, they're over dams, and they also obviously provide funding, but there are dams that make this possible, to actually have the water on drought years so that we're able to release the water. This year, obviously, everybody is very, very aware of that, where we are in a drought. We're in the second driest state in the nation. And if it wasn't for these dams, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing. And theoretically, given the population, and this was a more severe drought than the drought that we had in the 1930s that actually dried up Utah Lake. And, it's thanks to the foresight of those who had these dams built that we actually do have the water to be able to enjoy Utah Lake, Provo River. The Provo River at one point was more just basically a muddy ditch. You do have the Provo Reservoir Water Users Company and the Provo River Water Users Association. And so these are two entities that actually do run the pumps at Utah Lake, but also Deer Creek and different various aqueducts that do run from there. And then obviously Division of Water Quality, which looks through and makes sure that the water quality on Utah Lake and the streams and the rivers throughout the entire state are within compliance. So here's some early pictures of the June suckers when they were harvesting eggs back before the hatchery program actually got started. And they said, hey, how are we going to do this? We got 300 individuals. They are a long-lived species. They live between 30 and 40 years in adulthood. And so they said, okay, how are we going to solve this? Well, we need to have a hatchery. We need to start raising our own June suckers so that we can reintroduce them. And, and this is what so they went out there, they started trapping them. They started harvesting the eggs. They started, doing this and doing, studies on the genetics so that they actually could have viable crosses and make sure that they didn't get a bottleneck through that. So here are some pictures of the early days, just all of the different, so here you have a species that little was known about it. And so now they're throwing a lot of effort in trying to save the species. And as anyone who's familiar with Utah Lake knows, Utah Lake is massive. And imagine trying to track 300 individuals, if it wasn't for the spawning runs, but trying to find 300 individuals out in Utah Lake, that's a daunting task. And so, there was, not only did they start doing that, they started managing and researching the water. They said, okay, what did the Provo River look like, and what do they need for spawning runs? They went through and systematically identified what do we need to do to ensure that the species can be recovered and that it can be self-sustaining. So one thing that was done was a study on the Provo River, and they said, okay, and they looked back through the history. They said, okay, what kind of flows came down the Provo River that would trigger a spawning run, and what did it look like? Because depending upon the water flows, there are different things that they do, not only for the fish but also for the substrate and the gravel substrate where they have the eggs and things like that. So what are we looking for in the Provo River? And so after they did a study, they came up with different flow regimes, a wet year, a medium year, and a dry year. And they said, hey, we're going to try to meet these flow regimes so that it'll benefit the June sucker and not only get the fish up the stream or up the river so that they can spawn, but also take the larvae and get them back out into Utah Lake. One component, and this right here was pretty much the pilot project, was, for nursery habitat. And as I talked earlier, Provo River, because it was channelized, it turned into almost like a giant bathtub. And as the larvae were floating down, they would come into this, wide, slow area of a bathtub, and they just kind of settle down. And then the larvae would get eaten by the other fish like white bass and other feces, and they would just get, decimated. And so they said, okay, what we're going to do is we want to restore the deltas. And they identified Hollow Creek as a potential. And so right here in this picture, you have an area called the Hollow Creek Wildlife Management Area. As by the first exit, as you're going south to Springville, I think it's between 21 and 24 acres is what it is. On the left shows you before the vegetation came back, and on to the south of the property, which is the left there, now there's a big pickleball building right there. So that, I mean, that's one of the things that you can notice from the freeway. And this is a great area. You can go through there, but this was kind of the pilot program for what would become right now, for those of you who've been down to Utah Lake, is a Provo River Delta restoration. You know, it's going to be the missing component in our recovery strategy. So right here is a kind of overview of the Provo River Delta restoration. It's just over 200 acres of habitat that is going to be restored to mimic the Delta, basically nursery habitat and brood rearing habitat for the June sucker. So what's going on here is similar. Let me back up a page so you can see the meandering creek going through there, and then kind of how it goes out to the Delta and kind of spreads out there. And especially now that you've had a lot more vegetation, a lot more time has passed, the river, the creek down there has changed a little bit from where, you know, it was originally. It'll meander like any other Delta a little bit as it, you know, feathers out and spreads out into the Delta. And so here's kind of an overview of the Provo River Delta. And what you have is you have areas that are the way they've designed it is so that it will maintain water in drought years, but also it'll accommodate water in high water years. There's going to be 4 access points going out into Utah Lake from there. It's the old Skipper Bay Dike Trail. For those of you that have been walking down along there, they actually are removing a bunch of the Skipper Bay Dike Trail. It's shut down right now, and they're going to route it where the construction road access is. That is where the running trail is going to connect, and it's just going to follow basically along this fence line. Sorry, we got the cleaning ladies here at the office. So if you guys can hear the vacuums, I apologize. But I don't know if you can see my mouse or not, cursor on there, but it's going to follow along the green line there, and it'll connect you over to the old Provo River Trail, and also to the Delta Gateway Park that is going to be completed as well. There'll be a nice Delta Gateway Park. And so this Delta here, not only is it going to play an important component in the recovery of the June suckers, but what you're going to have is also a great area for recreating, for kayakers, for paddle boarders, for bird watchers. Anglers are going to be able to go in there. I urge any of you, especially to go down to Hobble Creek Wildlife Management Area, just picture something similar to that, but 10 times larger than what it is. And this is under construction. They do offer tours. The tours will be picking back up this spring. And they do have, it's just provorriverdelta.us is their website, and you can actually sign up and schedule a tour on a Saturday, and you can come and see how the construction's going on. The river will be diverted. Part of the river, most of the river will be diverted through the Delta, but there still will be enough water to go down and maintain the old lower, about a mile of the lower Provo River will still have water flowing through it, even after most of it is diverted through this Delta. So here's kind of some pictures of Utah Lake. Utah Lake has been, I don't know what other, I haven't watched any of the other videos that Sam has had shown, but right now Utah Lake is at the forefront of a lot of stuff you guys have heard of, like the Utah Lake restorations. You've heard a lot of different things about Utah Lake. And one thing is Utah Lake is a shallow water lake. For the most part, shallow water lakes, they have 2 states. Either you're, kind of not a whole lot of vegetation, and you're kind of murky and kind of silty, and things get mixed up and not that clear. And then, even at best, back when the pioneers came in, Utah Lake was never a Lake Tahoe. It was, quite a bit clearer, But where people are saying that it was super clear, it was never a Lake Tahoe, if that makes sense. But here's some pictures just showing the biodiversity in Utah Lake, and in the top right are some pictures of the carp that have been removed out of Utah Lake. These are some older photos from some of we do have commercial fishing going on right now, removing the carp. So here's 1901 quote: "We found the lake trout had done poorly because of the low and consequently muddy water, and then the carp, which have thriven immensely, have eaten off the mosses and similar growth along the bottom of the lake, so that the trout have not had enough to eat. Carp are a good deal like the English sparrow. Once they get into a place, they are there to stay." And one thing to note about carp is back in the 1800s, when the U.S. was trying to have, they were called fish cars, if I remember that's the correct term. I've got pulled up just a website on them for you guys. But they would send them carp out in these barrels, or these buckets, for lack of a better word. People would buy them, and they said, hey, for so much money, like $2.50 plus shipping, or whatever it was, you can have these 12 carp or whatever fit into this container, and all you need to do is dig a hole, add some water to it, you dump the carp in it, and then you've got something that you can actually harvest and sell, and you can make money. And at that point, carp were selling so much per pound because it was considered a delicacy in Europe, and you did have a lot of European immigrants coming through. And so a lot of people said, hey, it's good to have carp in these. They're super robust. They thrive almost anywhere. They're hard to kill off. And, hey, let's do this so that we actually have not only food for us, but, possibly income. And so, that was kind of how it started. So we've been doing carp removal since there was a pilot program, but I want to say it was 2012 was when it really kicked off. But, just to put it in perspective, how much carp we have removed as far as biomass, it would basically be 14,600 tons, which is the equivalent of 123 blue whales. Or, to put that into better perspective for those of you who've seen elephants and gone up to the Hogle Zoo, about 3,044 African elephants would be about the same equivalent. So it's a staggering amount of carp that have been removed over the past few years. It's huge. Carp removal has slowed down. So the idea, the threshold that the target, they were looking between 75 and 85% of the original biomass of carp in the lake to be removed. And that was the target in 2017 or 2018, that was achieved. And now we're trying to maintain, and it'll fluctuate up and down depending upon the water level in Utah Lake. It'll depending upon the recruitment and other, there are other variables, but that is the target where the program is trying to maintain now the biomass of the carp to about 85% of its original level. And that was the idea, through the science that, hey, if we get it down to this percentage, this should give, enough breathing room for the macrophyte, for the vegetation to reestablish, but also for the June sucker and other species, to thrive out in Utah Lake. We're always looking at novel techniques to see how we can improve and hopefully someday extirpate carp. But in a lake the size of Utah Lake, it's a daunting task and nearly impossible at this time to remove all of the carp out of Utah Lake. And one of the questions that we always get asked is, people say, hey, why couldn't you just poison Utah Lake? And it's just not feasible for multiple reasons. And an easy reason is that the poison that typically is used is called rotenone. And someone actually did the math a few years ago, and they said, you know what, you would need at that point to have the 100% of all the rotenone production in the world held on to for 1 year to have enough to poison Utah Lake. And yeah, that just kind of highlights, you know, one of the hurdles. But on top of that, if you don't get them all, they're just going to bounce back. You know, a very famous quote is nature abhors a vacuum. And, you know, especially with an invasive species, just like the carp, you know, if there are any left, they're just going to start rebounding if you try, you know, that type of a method. So really not that feasible. But that is a question that everybody, you know, seems to come up with is, you know, why not just poison it off? And it's just not feasible for multiple reasons. So as of today, you know, we went from 300 individuals this last year. So this last spawning run of tagged fish, you know, you went from 300. We had our largest spawning run that we've ever had, and we were over 4,000 tagged individuals. And there are quite a few fish coming through that either they've lost their tag or they're not all tagged that we release. And so, you know, of the tagged individuals, we had over 4,000 individuals, which is amazing. And throughout the course of the whole program for the past 20 years, last year, the Fish and Wildlife did make a decision. They put it out there on February 4th. They were downlisted from endangered to threatened. Basically, what that means when a species is endangered is the Fish and Wildlife says that if we do not step in, they are going to go extinct. And when you move it back to threatened, what it means is that the possibility is still there, but it's not imminent. Endangered is like it is going extinct. Threatened is like now you kind of you might go extinct. And because we are moving away from endangered to threatened, if you look at the Endangered Species Act, through the whole history of the Endangered Species Act, only 110 species, 54 of one and 56 of the other. So basically, I forget which is which, but they've only had, we'll say, 54 species that have been delisted, completely taken off, and 56 species that have gone from endangered to threatened. And that's basically since I think it was signed in 1973. So basically 1974 till 2020, I guess 22, but it's 21 now, you've only had 110 species that have had moved either to endangered to threatened or completely taken off. And so this is a pretty big deal. It was only the 5th fish species in the entire history that has ever done that. And one of the reasons for that is fish species, especially like the June sucker, it's only found in one location, and it's limited to Utah Lake and limited by water is one of the main limiting factors to it. And where we are in a desert, it's amazing, that we have actually been able to make it just this far. And so people are asking about, you know, how do we get it delisted? Because that's ultimately the goal. You know, we're not, you know, just happy with downlisted. We actually do want to get delisted. So what we have is what they call Endangered Species Mitigation Fund that was set up in 1997 by the state of Utah. And this is, you know, one of the greatest pictures that was ever presented in one of the advisory board committees in 2015. And this shows a gridlock. I mean, now we kind of chuckle about it. It kind of looks like I-15 up by 2100 South. But one thing that you notice here, there is no off-ramp. And the Endangered Species Mitigation Fund, the Stakeholder Advisory Committee, in this meeting, they said, hey, we need to make sure that we have an off-ramp from the Endangered Species Act. Our goal is really to delist the species that do get on there and prevent species from getting listed. And, you know, that has been the goal, you know, since the beginning of, you know, of the June sucker recovery program is we want full recovery and we want it to get delisted, you know, on there. One thing I failed to note earlier is that the June sucker a lot of people have a misconception, hey, the June sucker is a trash fish, the June sucker is a bottom feeder, why do we care about it? Well, the June sucker is an indicator species. What that means is the better the June sucker is doing, is it tells you the overall health of Utah Lake is better. So by restoring and delisting the June sucker and recovering it, it is going to help promote more a healthier Utah Lake for everybody to enjoy. Let me take a drink. Sorry.
No worries.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I typically don't talk this long in a day. So delisting, it's got to be supported by science. So that is one of the things that we do. We do a lot of research. We do a lot of monitoring. And the reason is that we actually have to back up, with anything if anyone, so when they say, hey, we petition that it be delisted or downlisted, they say, okay, show us why, give us the data. And then that goes out and people can review it and people can challenge that. And so basically what we're trying to work towards is to prove that the species isn't going to go extinct or is threatened to go extinct, based upon everything that we have done and what the science and the facts show. So here, just anyone's interested, the difference in the definitions between endangered and threatened. And then, so one thing that has come about lately is a term called conservation reliance. And this, we feel, is probably where the June sucker is headed, even after delisting. And what that means is that even after being delisted, they are still going to need some help to make sure that they don't get and go back on the Endangered Species Act. Obviously, June sucker program, a good example would be, okay, we've got the Delta there. There is going to be some maintenance down on the Delta. There's probably going to be, either carp removal or something like that. It depends on what the science says, but there are going to still be certain tasks that will be needed. Water will still need to be delivered for the spawning runs through the Provo River and Hobble Creek. You just can't say, okay, we're done, wash your hands and walk away. There still are going to be a continuing, long-term management goals and objectives to keep the species from becoming relisted, on the Endangered Species Act. So that's one of the going to be the main things as we progress towards delisting, is to make sure that there are assurances and safeguards set up so that when it is delisted, that it'll continue to thrive and reestablish itself in Utah Lake. So this just kind of gives an idea of what things that we are looking at. Excuse me. And right now we are redoing our program document and identifying, and here's the 5 criteria, as we're moving from endangered to threatened. And how are we going to address the non-native and sport fish management? Not only do you have carp in there, but now you have northern pike, you have crappie, you have bass, white bass, you have, there's catfish. How are we going to handle that, going forward? Habitat development, maintenance, obviously the Provo River Delta, how are we going to maintain it, water management. And you can see the list. Basically, there's 6 areas. And currently, one that we're working on today is obviously information and education, just getting the public to know more about Utah Lake and more about the June sucker and the June sucker program. So basically, this working this way, we are on a pathway to delisting. So that's one presentation. Let me see if I can share my screen. And if you have any questions, John, or feel free to ask. Trying to see where the controls are on Zoom.
What are you looking to switch over?
I want to show my browser. So let me.
So just end share and then reshare. You can go straight to your browser.
All right, new share. Oh, I should say end share. Stop share. All right.
There you go.
Now let me try this again. So where's my browser? All right. So number one, great place for all things June sucker. I'm going to put our plug in there. Is the junesuckerrecovery.org. This is our website. We do make updates on there. Can you see this pretty good there, Sam?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. So basically, when you come to the program, when you come here, the overview, you know, it's like many websites. You know, it kind of gives you an overview. You know, what is the June sucker? What is the program? You know, talks a little bit about all these things. But one of the cool areas is you come over here to the resources and outreach. So you have Utah Lake, and so for those who are watching, you know, we do have the Utah Lake Legacy video on here. It is on YouTube, and if you go straight to YouTube, it is probably easier to view a lot of the time. It's about 48 or 55 minutes of the history of Utah Lake. Lots of great video. Sam, have you guys talked about this at all in any of your other meetings?
We did, yeah. My presentation that we did on Tuesday night was about the past, present, and future of the lake. And I, in regards to the past section, referred heavily to the legacy video. We really encourage people to see it. It's a great, I mean, less than an hour, like Russ said, it's a great way to learn about the history of the lake.
Yeah, it is. And we actually have PDFs of the book that was made. Also, if anyone's interested, just reach out. My email is on this website, and I can get you the PDF, and it, you know, you can read through there. It's a fairly short book, but it's got some awesome photos. But one thing cool on this website also is you can see back some of these older pictures that are found in the book. But one of the cool ones is here. I was talking about the severe drought. That shows two guys in 1934. Lehigh Sun newspaper is what it was. But it just shows you could actually walk across Utah Lake. You know, and they just talk about the different parts of the history of Utah Lake and of the June sucker. But you know, this website there, you can look at all the different programs. Most people are interested in one of the number one things they are interested is in the carp removal. And so it does get updated, but it does show the carp removal and how they have been removing carp throughout the years. Currently, I want to, Sam, I don't know. I know we were going to end at 8. I don't know how, you want to do this, but the newest emerging threat that obviously fishermen you would be interested in is the northern pike in Utah Lake. We are working on a northern pike telemetry study. We do have anchor tagged fish out there. Let me actually show you. Let me stop sharing and pull up another presentation just so people can see what I'm talking about. And we'll go back to the website real fast. I thought I had it pulled up there. You probably can't. Can you see that?
You're not showing anything right now.
All right. No, there it is. Okay, perfect. Found it. Sorry, I had too much show. All right. So here's kind of here's a northern pike, and this is the picture that I want to show you. If you look here in the bottom right corner of this, on this fish, this northern pike, you do see a red, what they call an anchor tag. You probably can't see my mouse hovering around it, but we have implanted in about 50, just shy of 50 fish, an anchor tag with a, let's see if we can see the radio. So there's the anchor tag, but they also do have ultrasonic receiver and a radio tag in a lot of them. So if you do see a fish, obviously we do want northern pike killed and not released back into Utah Lake. unless it has one of these red anchor tags in it, because those are part of a study. And so other than those, please, euthanize all of the northern pike that you do catch. That would be very appreciated. So let me go back to, stop. My mouse is a little bit slow here. So we'll go back to the website. Also another great website. I'm going to put a plug in. Did you guys talk about the Delta website, Sam?
Mentioned it briefly. I did also mention that you would be speaking, so we didn't hit on it too much.
Okay. So here's the Provo River Delta website. It's provoriverdelta.us, and this is an awesome website. They put out press releases. They've got tons of photos. They've got their bird monitoring is second to none, because due to the proximity to the Provo airport, they've been doing phenomenal bird monitoring. BYU has been doing the bird monitoring for them for 5 years. So, they have, great videos. You can watch the videos on the Provo River Delta, what it's going to be like. There's going to be new videos this year, obviously, as in the fall when we turn the Provo River, divert part of it into the Delta. So this is a great website, excuse me, a great website to peruse. Like I said, it's got so much going on that it just, I can't do it justice in the time that we have left. And especially if anyone likes GIS, geographical information systems, or just maps in general. But this kind of shows you an overview. Can you see you can't see my mouse, correct, Sam?
We can see it.
Oh, you can? Oh, good. So right here, this is the parking lot, kind of by Harbor Drive. And this, you got the bathrooms right here for anyone who's walked down the Provo River Trail. Right down here, obviously, is the state park. And then you can, and here you've got, I forget if this one's Alligator Park, where you can park right here, and and there's the other park where a lot of people fish. And this is really the slow meandering part of the Provo River. But this just kind of shows you right here is where we're going to divert the water into the Delta, and then just the rest. We will leave water in here, and this will still be a great area where people can fish, just like they always have. Especially for there's during the white bass spawning run, there's tons of people fishing through here. But that just kind of shows you an overview of that. And then anyone who is, interested, I found this, this is a pretty decent website. I'm not putting a plug for, anything else, but they have some awesome pictures talking about the fish car era and the National Fish Hatchery system for back in the day. They showed like the train cars that I was telling you about, and how across the United States, how fish stocking really took off at the turn of just before the turn of the 19th century there, and just what it took and for people. And here there's some of the containers that they used to put fish in there, and they would and these look like milk containers, on there, and they would dump out the fish and whatnot. So if you get a chance, you can read through there. With that, having said that, Sam, we're 10 minutes early. I mean, like I said, I don't know if any questions.
That's totally fine. There's no worries with finishing up early. I guess we could probably just see if you've hit your stuff. If there's anything that John has questions wise, since he's our unique single listener tonight. And John, no pressure if you don't have any questions either. We'll make sure we get this up on the YouTube channel so people can watch. Well, Russ, anything else you want to leave people with, just because as a kind of final statement, if you would?
No, well, putting me on the spot there. Final statement is I guess we could just say good things have happened. We're standing on the shoulders of great people who've done a lot of good work. What we do and what has been done could not be done without all of the partner agencies. I think that You know what's unique? I was, recently at a conference out of state, and somebody from one of the other states said, how is it possible to have 9 different agencies and an outreach group, and a public interest group? How can you have 9 agencies actually work together without fighting? And I'm sure at the beginning of this process, there were probably where people were butting heads and whatnot, but it is, a great compliment, and everything that has been accomplished to show how, this pretty much is what other recovery programs should strive to be, just based upon how all of the agencies have come together. They have a common goal, and they've worked together, and they've had great success. I don't want to take the credit for people who've put in 20 plus years of making this happen. It's, they've worked long and hard, and they've had uphill battle. Like I said, it's only the fifth fish species that's been downlisted. And so the final plug is just, a lot has happened, a lot of good stuff. I know, we're making people more aware of how great Utah Lake is and what it was and what it can be. But great things have happened, even if it's been, not as visible to the public. And I think the more people get interested and educated about it, they'll understand how much has been done and how great it is. So that would be my final plug.
I think that's a perfect plug too, especially with the fact that this workshop is centered around that, of trying to provide opportunities for people to learn. I can't tell you how many people I've met that, they say, what's the June Sucker program, or what's the Utah Lake Commission? What are you doing? Like they're not aware. So hopefully we have lots more views on this one on YouTube. This is our final workshop. So thank you, Russ, for helping us with it tonight. And
thank you.
We'll make sure that we have some questions in the survey to see what people have enjoyed about the presentations and what we can involve in the future. Obviously, as health situations improve with the pandemic, we'd love to have some kind of in-person opportunity with people too in the future, maybe next year's challenge. But thank you so much, Russ. And thank you, everybody who's watching this after the fact as well.
Yes, thank you. And any questions, feel free to email me. I think, Sam, my email is on that website. So any questions, comments, or concerns, I'm more than willing to answer them.
Awesome. Thanks again, Russ. You have a great evening.
You too.